At just 5'4", he was easy to overlook, but Walter Stadnick would become one of the most powerful men in Canada's underworld. He was a mastermind who transformed the Hells Angels from a collection of street gangs into an organized crime syndicate that dominates the country's criminal underworld. His rise was marked by ruthless ambition, violent betrayals, and bloody biker wars. Police called him a criminal genius. Rivals called him untouchable. This is the rise and fall of Walter Stadnick, the mastermind who made the Hells Angels Canada's most feared outlaw motorcycle club. Old Walter Stadnick, born on August 3, 1952 in Hamilton, Ontario, a quiet, unassuming kid from a Ukrainian immigrant family. Yet this seemingly ordinary boy would one day become the most influential outlaw biker in Canadian history. Nicknamed Nugget, a name possibly tied to his high school drug dealing days, Stadnick grew up on Hamilton's Mountain, a tough neighborhood riddled with petty crime. As a child, he was well behaved and sharp, but teachers noted a distinct lack of motivation, as if he had no interest in conventional success. By his teenage years, Walter had already gained a reputation as the local hash dealer at Hill Park Secondary School. He dressed flashy, rocked bright jewelry, and had a knack for fighting. Despite studying just 5'4", he even started his own biker gang, the Cossacks, a nod to his Ukrainian roots. In 1970, he was arrested twice for drug possession, and his crew caused a full-blown courtroom blow during one of his hearings. Still, that didn't slow him down. Earlier in his biker career, Stadnick tried to join Satan's Choice, the most powerful outlaw club in Ontario at the time, but its leader Mario the Whoop Parente reportedly rejected him, allegedly because of his hate. That rejection ignited a fierce personal rivalry. So, Walter joined a rival club, the Wild Ones, in 1977. This was a significant step up, and it was here he began his methodical climb through the outlaw biker world. Unlike many in the scene, Stadnick didn't smoke, rarely drank, and avoided drugs. He was all business, observing, learning, and planning. Little did anyone know this quite disciplined biker from Hamilton was about to fundamentally reshape Canada's entire outlaw motorcycle landscape. By 1977, Walter Stadnick had made enough noise to get noticed, but not everyone was impressed. One Satan's Choice member, Cecil Kibbe, remembered seeing Stadnick at a biker convention in Wasaga Beach that year and dismissed him as a poser, someone trying too hard to look hardcore. Despite the critics, Stadnick had become president of the Wild Ones, a small Hamilton-based club that willingly did the Mafia's dirty work. They bombed businesses and collected payments, hardering task traditional mobsters wanted to avoid. Though he was still mostly invisible to the public, sharp cops like John Gordon Harris were already watching him closely. Then the biker world in Canada exploded on July 1, 1977. Mario Parente and his chapter of Satan's Choice patched over to the Outlaws, who were expanding into Canada. Just months later in December, the Popeyes, a brutal Quebec biker gang, patched over to become Canada's first Hells Angels chapter. By early 1978, the Outlaws and Hells Angels were at war. It kicked off when a Hells Angel gunned down two Outlaws in Montreal, one fatal. Stadnick, always seeing the bigger picture, saw an opportunity in the kills. He reached out to Yves Buteau, the national president of the Canadian Hells Angels, looking to patch the Wild Ones into the club. But that strategic move would come at a deadly cost. The Outlaws didn't like the Wild Ones causing up to their enemies. In brutal retaliation, 5 Wild Ones between 1978 and 1979. With bodies piling up, the gang voted to disband. Stadnick, however, was not backing down. He coolly believed he was too smart to get caught, and perhaps he was. In October 1978, he traveled to Montreal to meet Buteau and other Angels, a meeting that nearly cost him his life. At Le Tourbillon Bar, 2 American outlaws stormed in guns blazing. 3 bikers were killed, 2 Wild Ones, and 1 Hells Angel, and several more were wounded. Stadnick survived by hiding under a table, witnessing the carnage firsthand. In retaliation, the Hells Angels sent their top assassin, Yves Apache Trudeau, to eliminate the man responsible, and he did, using a car bomb in March 1979. When Stadnick returned to Hamilton, the Wild Ones were gone, disbanded and scattered, but Walter didn't give up. He remained fiercely loyal to the Hells Angels, quietly operating in Hamilton while staying closely connected to the Montreal chapter. The man once seen as a poser had not only survived a brutal biker war and lived through a massacre, but was now a lone soldier, his eyes firmly set on building something far bigger than anyone could have imagined. Despite not speaking a word of French, Walter Stadnick joined the Montreal South chapter of the Hells Angels, the powerful mother chapter, and quickly rose through the ranks, his quiet ambition noted by the club. On May 26, 1982, he earned his full patch. Later that year, he returned to Hamilton with another ex-Wild One, Noel Frenchy Mailloux, who had acted as his translator in Montreal. But things quickly went sideways. Mailloux, high on cocaine, committed a horrible trip, killing his girlfriend's 4-year-old son and her best friend, then shooting the girlfriend multiple times. This drug-fueled rampage shocked the public and temporarily delayed Stadnick's effort to bring the Hells Angels into Ontario. Meanwhile, in British Columbia, the Hells Angels expanded west, patching over Satan's Angels to form new chapters, but tensions were rising fast. When two Hells Angels were spotted by the Outlaws in Ontario, a gunfight broke out at a donut shop in Wawa. No one died, but the message was clear. The Outlaws didn't want the Angels in their territory. Then it came a major blow. On September 8, 1983, Stadnick's mentor Yves Buteau was assassinated by the Outlaws along with another biker he was meeting about Apache over. With Buteau gone, many thought Stadnick's career was over. After all, he didn't speak French in a mostly francophone club. But the Angels had other ideas. Michel, Langlois, and legend Zigzag Lessard, the new top brass, believed Stadnick was their best hope of breaking into Ontario, recognizing his strategic mind despite the language barrier. Around this time, he started wearing the ominous Filthy Few patch, said to be awarded to Hells Angels who for the club. But Hamilton was not exactly rolling out the red carpet. The city was controlled by three powerful Mafia families and the local Outlaws chapters. Mafia boss Johnny the Enforcer Papalia openly despised bikers and wanted the Angels nowhere near his staff. Then came another twist of fate. On September 8, 1984, exactly 1 year after Buteau's death, Stadnick crashed his motorcycle into a car driven by a Catholic priest on his way to see the Pope. The accident left Walter severely burned. He lost parts of his nose and fingers, and his face was left horrifically scarred. At St. Joseph's Hospital in Hamilton, his protection became a spectacle. During the day, the hallways were filled with burly bikers from the 13th tribe, hoping to earn their Hells Angels patches by guarding him. At night, Hamilton police took over for security, a strange sight that transformed the band unit into something out of a crime thriller. The 13th tribe eventually got what they wanted. They patched over in December 1984, becoming the first Hells Angels chapter in Atlantic Canada. After his injuries, Stadnick became even more introverted, but his dangerous ambition only deepened. By 1986, he was living quietly in a trailer park in Calisol, Ontario. Neighbors described him as friendly and unremarkable. No one suspected he was one of the Canada's top outlaw bikers. Police surveillance found a fentanyl hidden near his property, but Stadnick never touched them. He was too careful, too calculating. He ran the rebel roundhouse, a Hamilton bar that doubled as his office, a place to host visiting Angels and conduct business. The Outlaws even plotted to fire a rocket launcher at the bar to kill him, but the police intervened just in time, highlighting the constant threat he faced. That same year, Stadnick met Maurice's mom Boucher, a rising Hells Angel in Montreal. Despite the language barrier, the two formed a strong complementary alliance that would fundamentally shape the future of the club. In 1987, Stadnick made a move in Toronto, trying to convince the Vagabonds, a 70-member drug dealing club, to join the Hells Angels. Their leader, Snorkel and Melanson, agreed to start buying drugs only from the Angels, but he got high on his own supply and lacked up an $80,000 debt. When he tried to hand over part of the money at a hotel, he was found dead the next day. 2 bullets in his head and the cash gone. That chilling message effectively killed the patch over deal. Then came Stadnick's first arrest in over a decade, just a drunk driving charge, a minor inconvenience that barely slowed his relentless ascent. In 1988, with the Hells Angels rearing from the fallout of the Lennoxville massacre and mass arrests, National President Michel Langlois fled to Morocco. Stadnick was chosen as the new national president of the Canadian Hells Angels, not because of his popularity, but because he was the last man standing with both experience and an unshakable mind for strategy. At the time, the club was in disarray. Dozens of Angels were in prison, all on the run. but under Stadnick's quite formidable leadership, the stage was set for a major comeback and a nationwide expansion that would make the Hells Angels the most feared outlaw biker club in Canada. By 1988, Walter Stadnick had risen through the ashes of Ontario's outlaw biker scene to become the national president of the Hells Angels in Canada. The wild ones were gone, but Stadnick was now working on something far more ambitious, a national biker empire built on a corporate model. He started building smart, selecting the right lieutenants. He appointed Maurice Boucher, a former white supremacist and convicted as his key lieutenant in Quebec. Boucher, cold and ruthlessly violent, was everything Stadnick wasn't, and that was precisely the point. While Boucher handled business on the brutal Quebec front, Stadnick focused on strategic expansion elsewhere: Ontario, the Prairies, Manitoba, and the North. But Walter was not just looking to plant flags. He was laying down an intricate infrastructure, and it was all revolved around one thing: drugs. In the late 80s and early 90s, Stadnick quickly turned northern Ontario into a lucrative drug zone. Cities like Timmins, Thunder and Sudbury were far from the headlines but perfect for moving products. He understood something most bikers didn't: if you control the flow, you control the street. He tried to patch over clubs like the Vikings, the Vagabonds, and the Loners, and even Satan's Choice. Many said no. They wanted to keep their own colors. Stadnick didn't push. He simply supplied their drugs instead. Either way, they worked for him, and that was just fine. In Winnipeg, he made a major play. He knew the city was a natural link between eastern and western Canada, crucial for any gang hoping to move in across provinces. Stadnick strategically made Winnipeg a central hub for the Hells Angels' drug distribution. And unlike Butcher's war-hungry tactics in Quebec, Walter played the long game: diplomacy over bullets, deals over death. While Butcher was blowing up enemies and running assassination squads, Stadnick stayed meticulously clean. No murders directly attributed to him, no media spotlight, just relentless quiet expansion. By 1993, all Canadian chapters of the Hells Angels ultimately reported to Montreal, and Stadnick had made himself the unseen hand pulling the strings across the country. His control was absolute, yet almost imperceptible to the public. But his low profile didn't make him invisible to law enforcement. In 1988, Stadnick was arrested with another Angels on drug charges. The case was tossed, but he stayed fumbling on the radar. Then in 1992, he was pulled over and the cops hit the jackpot. Over $80,000 in cash, including $15,000 hidden in a custom gold belt buckle shaped like a Hells Angels logo. The belt buckle alone was worth $2,000. A blatant symbol of his wealth and ego. A judge ordered all of it seized. Stadnick tried to argue he had won the money gambling. Nobody bought it. Still, nothing stuck. He walked free again. In one court appearance, Stadnick showed up in full swag: cowboy boots, designer jeans, snakeskin belt, wool fur coat. Reporters swarmed, desperate for a quote, but Walter didn't speak. He let the opulent outfit do the talking, projecting an image of untouchable power. In private though, he could be intimidating. When a CBC journalist, Melania Verga, began investigating him, Stadnick allegedly hired a private investigation to follow her home, a chilling reminder that he was watching. It worked. Verhage left her job soon after, unnerved. Stadnick's power was not just in drugs. It was in the fear he commanded. But the cops were closing in. He made himself a national biker boss without even pulling a trigger. But now his growing empire was under intense scrutiny. And Walter Stadnick was about to learn that in Canada, even the smartest outlaw can only outrun the law for so long. By the early 1990s, Walter Stadnick had emerged not just as a biker boss, but as a visionary architect of Canada's outlaw empire. His next move, breaking the fierce resistance that had kept the Hells Angels out of Western Canada for nearly a decade. Stadnick strategically moved into Winnipeg, a city long controlled by two local clubs, the Spartans and Los Bravos. Both were mostly dealing in auto theft, but Stadnick offered them something far more lucrative: cocaine. He became their exclusive supplier. Cocaine from Montreal, profits they could not refuse. By expertly playing their rivalry to his advantage, Stadnick slowly pulled both clubs under his influence. By 1993, he had ended a violent biker war that had plagued Winnipeg for 2 years, demonstrating his knack for order and control. By it, his ambition stretched far beyond Winnipeg. In Ontario, he established a puppet club, the Demon Keepers, led by Dany. They failed miserably, unable to sell a single gram of in Toronto, and soon collapsed. This setback stung. became disillusioned turned police informant, and rival Hells Angels Scott Steinert openly mocked Stadnick's failure, setting off a bitter power struggle inside the organization. As Quebec descended into the infamous biker war of the 1990s, Stadnick stayed cautious, almost paranoid about assassination, but even amid chaos, he kept building. Quietly, effectively, always with an eye on the bigger picture. He had Montreal's puppet club, the Rockers, establish the Red Rhinos in Winnipeg, a puppet of a puppet, protected by layers of deniability. Meanwhile, he was back in Ontario, subtly winning and dining leaders of Satan Choice, and the Dabia's outlaw clubs, tirelessly trying to convince them to patch over to the Angels. In June 1995, Stadnick and Maurice Boucher founded the Nomads chapter, a super elite arm of the Hells Angels. These were not regional bikers. These were the best of the best with no geographic limits and one all-consuming mission: domination. At the top of a meticulously structured pyramid sat a secretive inner circle called La Table, 5 men who controlled drug prices for the entire country. It was a multi-layered, profit-driven syndicate. The street-level bikers took the risk, the nomads at the apex took the vast majority of the cash. By now, Stadnick spent so much time in Winnipeg he had an apartment and even a son, Damon, nomad spelled backwards. But his burgeoning empire was not confined to one city. He was on the road constantly, meeting leaders, brokering peace, sealing deals. He confided to one informant his grand dream: one club, one patch, one country. But not everyone was on board. Stadnick's feud with Steinert escalated dramatically after Steinert's bodyguard killed a Los Bravos member in Halifax, derailing patchover plans. Furious, Stadnick allegedly over $10,000 to have Steinert killed, showing his ruthless side when diplomacy failed. He told an informant the Outlaws tried to kill him in Hamilton. A man approached his car at a red light, gun visible. Stadnick, with lightning reflexes, hit the gas, escaping with his life. Police saw him as incredibly elusive, careful, smart, and always one step ahead. He insulated himself so well that connecting him directly to crimes was a near impossible task. He even audaciously sued a police officer for damaging his solid gold-dealt head belt buckle, and lost a minor but telling moment of his hobbies. Then came a turning point, the murder of Hamilton Mafia boss Johnny Papalia. Suddenly, Stadnick had a clear path into Niagara and Hamilton, territories the mob had once fiercely protected. He forged powerful ties with Gerald Skinny Ward, a dangerous criminal rebel, and began methodically filling the power vacuum left by Papalia's death. July 1997, another milestone. Stadnick got the Grim Reapers of Calgary to patch over. The Edmonton chapter was launched, and Calgary's labels were brought in as prospects. Alberta was now firmly Hells Angels territory. That same year, when members of the Spartans gang were implicated in a horrific case, Stadnick, ever pragmatic, distanced himself, strategically shifting support to Los Bravos. With their improved status and the Red Liners joining them, his grip on Manitoba tightened significantly. A tense meeting followed in Winnipeg. Stadnick had to calmly diffuse tensions between the Montreal Rockers and Satan's Choice. He did, maintaining fragile control and demonstrating his diplomatic prowess. But then, the ultimate internal purge. In November 1997, Steinert and Magnussen were found. Heads smashed in, bodies dumped in the icy St. Lawrence River. The message was chillingly clear. There would be no rivals within his expanding dominion. The empire was nearly complete. Walter Stadnick had turned the Hells Angels into the most powerful criminal organization in Canada by blending diplomacy, ruthless efficiency, and corporate strategy. And the patch over was just the beginning. On April 7, 1998, 2 high-ranking members of the Outlaws biker gang, Jeffrey LaBrush and Jody Hart, were gunned down outside the Beef Baron strip club in London, Ontario. Their killers, Paul and Duane Lewis, were directly linked to the Hells Angels. This marked a chilling turning point. For the first time, individuals tied to the Hells Angels had killed in Ontario. The message was unmistakable. The Hells Angels were no longer just threatening expansion into the province, they were brutally executing it. Just 2 months later, the Spartans gang disbanded after their leader Darwin Sylvester mysteriously vanished in May. He was widely believed to have murdered after attending a meeting. His driver Robert Losmas was also found dead a few months afterward, sending another clear message of Hells Angels dominance. By the end of 1998, Walter Stadnick had become the primary drug supplier not only in Winnipeg but across all three prairie provinces, cementing his control over the West. In Toronto, OPP officer Leno Isnol witnessed something extraordinary at the exhibition ground. Stadnick and his bodyguards walked through a crowd that parted for them like he was royalty. He met with Andre Waltel, president of Satan's Choice Kitchener chapter, and spoke for 45 minutes before leaving. Isnol would later recall it was like watching a rock star in his prime, a testament to Stadnick's glowing, almost celebrity-like influence within the underworld. That summer, Stadnick made another powerful strategic move in Niagara Falls. Alongside the entire Sherbrooke chapter of Hells Angels, one of Canada's most violent, he met with Gerard Skinny Ward, a dominant drug trafficker in the region. Ward had been getting his from the Buffalo-based Magadino Mafia. But this summit changed everything from that moment forward. Ward agreed to buy exclusively from the Hells Angels, though not officially patched over until 2000. Ward and his gang were effectively part of the Angels by 1998. As one observer put it, Ward likely didn't want to join, but he was not given much choice. In August 1998, a biker rodeo took place by Lake Simcoe, hosted by the Loners. It was attended by several outlaw clubs: Satan's Choice, the Red Devils, Vagabonds, Last Chance, and the Paradise Riders. Midway through, the Hells Angel nomads, led by Stadnick himself, rode in unannounced, a powerful display of force. They mingled selectively, favoring some clubs while pointedly ignoring others. The message could not be clearer. A line was being drawn in Ontario's biker world. You were either with the Hells Angels or against them. The pressure was building. By September 7, Stadnick secured yet another victory when he persuaded the rebels gang of Saskatoon to patch over, officially giving the Hells Angels their first undisputed foothold in Saskatchewan. By the end of 1998, the only provinces without Hells Angels chapter were Manitoba, Ontario, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland, a testament to Stadnick's incredible expansion. In May 1999, Stadnick summoned two senior members of the Loners, Glenn Longway Atkinson and Pietro Pepe Barilla, to the Sherbrooke clubhouse. The reason: internal tensions between the Loners and the Paradise Riders in Toronto. Atkinson was stunned by the opulence of the clubhouse. It felt more like a lavish nightclub than a gang HQ. What shocked him even more was how much Stadnick knew the names and addresses of Loners members, their wives, their girlfriends. It felt less like a meeting and more like an ominous warning. Stadnick Lieutenant David Wolf Carroll was even more direct, aggressively demanding to know why Loners President Jimmy Russell had not come. Stadnick wanted the Loners to patch over, but not everyone agreed. Wayne Celestine, president of the St. Thomas chapter, was staunchly opposed. He expelled every Loner who supported the Hells Angels and even had one beaten and pistol whipped. Meanwhile, Jimmy Quartes, a Loner, worked with his brother John, a Sherbrooke Hells Angel, to undermine Celestine. The feud escalated on October 22, 1999 in a drive-by shooting in Loner Station. A pro Hells Angels Loner and a Sherbrooke Angel opened fire on Celestine as he sat in his truck. They failed to kill him, but tensions exploded. From 1999 to 2002, Ontario became a brutal battlefield. Beatings, brawls, and drive-by shootings became regular, terrifying events. The same year, the Hells Angels approached Dany, the imprisoned leader of the Indian Posé, one of the Western Canada's largest organized crime groups. They proposed a deal: the Hells Angels would supply drugs wholesale and the Indian Posé would handle street distribution. But Wolfley refused to be treated as a subordinate. In a recorded prison call, he made his position crystal clear: "We won't stand in front or behind you. We stand side by side." They wanted control. We just said no. That rejection solidified the Indian Posé as one of the Hells Angels' key and dangerous rivals in Western Canada. By June 2000, Walter Stadnick was operating at the peak of his influence. The Nomads Elite Latibol faction met with none other than Vito Rizzuto, the boss of Canada's most powerful mafia family. Over dinner at a Montreal restaurant, they struck a game-changing deal. Would be sold across Canada at $50,000 per kilogram. No exceptions. Montreal was split between Hells Angels and Rizzuto Tough. With the chilling understanding that anyone caught undercutting the price would face death, Stadnick had not just built a national drug empire, he had centralized it. Every Hells Angels chapter in Canada now had to buy their drugs from his Nomads chapter, with only the hyper-violent Sherbrooke chapter allowed to deal directly with the Rizzutos. This resembled a corporate franchise model, and many observers compared it to McDonald's. McDonald. If you wanted in, you bought your supplies from the top. Stadnick had transformed the Hells Angels from Mafia errand boys into equals, power blockers at the highest table of organized crime. In July 2000, his vision accelerated. Any deal, Los Bravos were elevated to prospect sitters. Just a day later, Stadnick met secretary with Satan's Choice chapter presidents in Winnipeg. He presented an irresistible offer to Ontario's outlaw biker gangs, patch for patch. Join the Hells Angels with the same rank you currently held. No waiting, no humiliating hang around or prospect faces, just immediate full patch status. The timing was crucial. The rock machine had begun expanding into Ontario and was moving toward a merger with the Texas-based Bandidos, a major Hells Angels rival. Stadnick needed to act fast to preempt any competition. On December 22, 2000, Los Bravos were granted full patch Hells Angels membership, a remarkably fast progression of just 5 months after becoming prospects. Then on December 29 came the bombshell, a mass patchover ceremony in Sorel, Quebec, just outside Montreal. Busloads of Ontario's bikers arrived. Entire clubs, Satan's Choice, the Vagabonds, the Lobos, the Last Chance, and the Paradise Riders, and even some loners, switched allegiance in a single historic day. Even members of the Outlaws and the Rock Machine, including the Kingston chapter president Paul Potter, patched over, betraying their old allegiances. By the end of that ceremony, an astonishing 168 new Hells Angels were minted. Ontario, which had no Hells Angels chapters just a day before, now had the highest concentration of chapters in the world. The scale was staggering. Only the US had more Hells Angels than Canada now. One journalist, aptly summing up Stadnick's strategy, remarked, "If you can't beat them, buy them." Still, not everyone in law enforcement was impressed. Some officers criticized the Hells Angels for accepting low-level street gangs like Last Chance and the Lobos, dismissively calling them mumblies, drug-addled, and incoherent. Yet the strategy worked. Stadnick offered dignity and status, and that's exactly what these gangs craved. And unlike the Bandidos, who forced all newcomers to start as prospects, Stadnick shrewdly respected outlaw hierarchy and status. His patch-for-patch model was almost unheard of, only done once before in Germany, showcasing his innovative, almost revolutionary approach. But by February 2001, the Angels officially ended the practice. The memo read, "The patch for patch is over tonight. We resume the tradition." Even then, internal tensions brewed. When Stadnick allowed Ward gangs in Niagara to form a chapter, even though Ward was not a biker and didn't ride, it drew heat. Stadnick had to personally clarify. Ward's crew would be prospects only, not full patch. Still, that Niagara chapter rapidly became the wealthiest in Ontario, controlling an estimated 75% of the trade in the region. Some like David Atwell, a Paradise Rider turned Hells Angel turned informant, felt a bitter resentment. He recalled Dew and others in Winnipeg resenting how easily Ontario gangs got patched in compared to the 3-year wait they had endured. Stadnick, ever the tactician, continued to avoid opening a chapter in Hamilton, despite having a dozen Angels living there. He meticulously kept a clean image in his hometown, even driving his elderly parents to church every Sunday, a bizarre contrast to his criminal life. But within the underworld, his influence was questioned. In cities like Toronto, loyal hangouts stood guard while he dined, even through winter, constantly keeping watch for possible assassins. As one officer observed of the diminutive 5'4" gangster walking the streets, "You look at him and think, what's he got?" But he had everything. March 28, 2001, Canadian authorities launched a massive crackdown on the Hells Angels. They called it Operation Springtime. One of the main targets, Walter Stadnick. A warrant was issued for 13 counts of first-degree murder. Police raided Stadnick's Hamilton home, and what they found was unexpected. A glimpse into his twisted mind. Detective Percy was turned to find a photograph of himself, the lead investigator, displayed prominently in Stadnick's bedroom, like a cheering trophy. But that was not all. Inside was a handwritten note from Stadnick's 10-year-old niece. It read, "Are you still the leader of the Hells Angels? I hope you can move the club to Canada and out of Quebec." A poignant, innocent question that highlighted the true scope of his power and family perception. Turns out, Walter Stadnick was nowhere near Ontario. He was in Jamaica, soaking up the sun in Montego Bay. But paradise didn't last long. He was swiftly arrested by Jamaican police and held in what his wife later called a hellhole, an overcrowded jail cell with a single bucket for a toilet. By April 10, 2001, Stadnick was back in Canada, extradited. No resistance, no drama, just the end of the line. Some speculated he fled because he knew the police were coming, but crime journalist Peter Langton didn't buy it. If he knew, he'd have picked Brazil, not Jamaica. RSMP officer Tom O'Neill finally sat face to face with the man behind Canada's Hells Angels empire. Stadnick, ever the quiet facade, told him, "I don't drink much, I don't do drugs, I am kind of a quiet guy." But O'Neill spotted a filthy few tattoo, the notorious mark awarded only to those who had killed for the club. When questioned, Stadnick with a smirk said, "Oh, that's because I like to party with the boys." The room went silent, the chilling implication hanging in the air. And when O'Neill dropped the name Dany King, a Locker's member and longtime police informant, Stadnick's composure finally cracked. He didn't know King had been feeding police info since 1994, a betrayal that must have stung the calculating boss. Operation Springtime also uncovered damning financial records from the Nomad's Bank in Montreal. Stadnick's con name, Gertrude. Between 1999 and 2001, the Nomad sold a staggering $111.5 million worth of drugs, cocaine and hashish across Canada. Stadnick's personal haul, 267 kilos of cocaine, 173 kilos of hash, a street value of $11.1 million. His personal profits, over $3 million. He was a multimillionaire gangster. While Stadnick sat behind bars waiting trial, chaos erupted on the street. A fierce war broke out in southwestern Ontario. On one side, the London Outlaws led by Thomas Hughes, on the other, the Hells Angels New London chapter led by Jimmy Coates, formerly of the Loners. Violence surged until July 2002. The new national leaders Gerard Ward from Niagara and Billy Miller from northern Toronto stepped in. They summoned key figures including Sherbrooke President Georges Boboy Bureau. The message was clear: stop the violence. Ontario's market was big enough to share and the media attention was hurting business. Privately, it was widely believed Ward and Miller were taking orders from behind bars from Walter Stadnick. Even insulated, his influence remained paramount. In 2003, the Crown brought Stadnick to trial. The charges were staggering: 13 counts of first-degree murder, 3 attempted murders, 1 conspiracy to commit murder, 2 narcotics trafficking charges, 2 counts of smuggling drugs. Also on trial, Donald Papp, Stockford, and Michael Ross. Stadnick, a proud Anglophone, exercised his right to an English trial in Montreal, a strategic move. He hired 2 of Canada's top defense lawyers, Edward Greenspan and Alan Gould. The Crown had $500,000 documents and 10 CD-ROMs worth of evidence, but Greenspan and Gould made a bold, audacious move. They demanded it all be translated into English. The Quebec government refused. Translation would cost over $23 million. The case went to Canada's Supreme Court and the request was denied, forcing the trial to move forward. Crown attorney Randall Richmond told the jury, more than anyone else, Stadnick and Stockford built the Hells Angels in Ontario and Manitoba. He argued that, like a general in wartime, Stadnick was responsible for the murders committed by his soldiers. But the judge was not convinced. There was not enough direct evidence to prove Stadnick personally gave the orders. Verdict: Walter Stadnick was acquitted of all 13 murder charges, a master of deniability. On September 13, 2004, Walter Stadnick was sentenced to 20 years in prison. His crimes: conspiracy to commit murder, drug trafficking, and active involvement in organized crime. The judge didn't hold back. Stadnick and his right-hand man, Donald Stockford, were labeled as hardened criminals, dangerous men with no sign of remorse. Stadnick was later transferred to maximum security in both 2006 and 2009 after being caught running drug operations and loan sharking while behind bars. His criminal ambition knew no bounds. Financially, things got worse. Although he'd always claimed to earn under $35,000 a year, the Canada Revenue Agency launched an audit and found otherwise. In 2006, he was slapped with a $1.2 million back tax bill. By 2008, Stadnick declared personal bankruptcy, the empire's money now out of his hands. In June 2014, he was granted parole, but it didn't last long. Suspected of reconnecting with outlaw bikers, his freedom was revoked within a month. However, by December, he convinced the parole board to give him a second chance under extremely tight conditions. He was banned from bars, alcohol, motorcycles, and even motorcycle repair work. His phone use was tracked, his finances heavily monitored. He could not even enter the province of Quebec, and he was placed under night curfew from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. An old man stripped of his power. By 2018, Stadnick was reportedly working in construction, seemingly living a quiet life. Then in April 2019, his parole restrictions ended. Just 4 months later, he boldly appeared at a Hells Angels funeral in British Columbia. The message was clear: Stadnick was back in the mix, a ghost from the past returning to haunt the present. Despite spending a decade in prison, Walter Stadnick's legacy remained untouched. The criminal empire he meticulously built didn't just survive, it thrived, a testament to his structural genius. Before Stadnick, outlaw bikers were underdogs, subcontractors for the Mafia. After him, they were equals, power brokers in their own right. By 2004, Quebec had 184 Hells Angels in operation, dominating the nation's biggest drug market. And even years after his conviction, authorities admitted the Hells Angels were and remain the most powerful crime group in Canada. In the brand words of journalist Peter Edwards, you either worked with the Hells Angels or you got out of the way. From a quiet kid in Hamilton to the godfather of Canada's most feared biker gang, Walter Stadnick didn't just rise through the ranks. He redefined them, building building an empire that outlived his freedom. Subscribe for more real crime stories that shaped nations. Hit the like button if you want us to cover more biker gang histories.